Hi everyone, and welcome to the Double Stuff Podcast, where we're not double the host like we normally are, but there's still two of us, and we're double the topics and double the fun. And I'm Charity,
and I'm Sarah,
and that's it.
Another sisterly episode.
I think our sister conversations are always fun, especially once we get Christy in there and you have that dynamic of all three of us.
It's a double stuff episode featuring the Harmon sisters. So
yes,
I think that's what that is.
So double the Harmon sisters, which is what you all asked for, I'm sure.
Yes.
But today's episode, I think it's going to be really fun because it's a topic that both of us like a lot. We're going to talk about. You want to give me a drum roll?
Ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, bum.
What the heck was that? What was that?
I realized, well, first I was actually going to hit the table. I'm like, that probably wouldn't work. So
I wish you guys could see what she did. She did this sad, gallop with her fingers. Okay, we'll dispense with the drum roll. But today, we're going to talk about British comedy. So I guess it's good that we're starting off with a giggle here.
and a gallop. A giggle and a gallop.
So I guess we can go back to the humble beginnings. Do you remember when we got interested in British comedy?
I kind of know when I got interested in British comedy. It actually happened in college, so it's actually fairly recent for me. So when I was in college, it was a good experience, but it was also a very strenuous experience being in college. And I guess because of that, just stuff wasn't funny anymore. All the stuff I had grown up with, and it's funny now, but just wasn't then, Laurel and Hardy, Three Stooges, all that. Maybe because I've seen it so much, it didn't seem funny anymore.
You needed something fresh.
I guess so. I was working on campus during one of the summers, and a bunch of guys were talking about Monty Python. Now, I had been aware of Monty Python. I didn't really quite get into them at the time in high school. I thought it was kind of weird. But they were like, Sarah, you got to see the Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I figured I'll go ahead and make that my ambition for the summer. And so I figure I want to understand how British humor works. I know some of it is kind of different from ours. I mean, not drastically. People are like...
That's so you. Someone wants you to do something fun and you're like, you know what?
I got to research.
Before we have fun, let me research the heck out of this. Let me look at the history and the stories behind it so I can truly understand.
I get what I ended up doing was I'm like, if I'm going to watch the Holy Grail film, I want to understand their sense of humor. So at the time, some wonderful soul had literally bootlegged all of the Monty Python episodes on YouTube. So I just binge watched all the episodes. I think they did 4 seasons. So all 4 seasons of Monty Python. So I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to watch the movie.
You got your diploma from your British comedy research?
I mean, because, again, I wanted to kind of understand. So I watched the Holy Grail movie and, it was okay. I know based on a lot of people, it's like, just okay. This is iconic. Now, I have appreciated it more now. But after I started watching Monty Python, thanks to YouTube, it has its suggestions. Like, well, if you watch this, then you'll probably like these. I guess technically Monty Python and YouTube introduced me to Morecambe and Wise, a very well-beloved British double act. I just thought they were very funny. And still, I think they're hilarious, and they're the closest to actually, my sense of humor.
Which is very unique. If you guys haven't picked up on Sarah's personality yet, 1, go back and listen to all the other episodes we've ever done, but 2, just take my word for it. It's a very unique style.
I used to think, I don't know if it's unique.
No, it's unique. Let's just... I mean, the fact that, I know we've talked about this on the show before, but this also peeks into Sarah's personality. The fact that as a 3-year-old, Sarah was watching
the Ten Commandments,
Charlton Heston.
All the way through.
Yeah, and then I think a few episodes ago, we talked about movies, the blockbuster hits, and that VeggieTales was in your top running until Elvis came and knocked it down. And the time that VeggieTales came out, you were 15.
Yeah, 14, 15, something like that. And
which is not in the demographic for VeggieTales. You know, now because we're PKs, we grew up with it, so that makes sense. But like for real,
for normal people,
yeah, for normal people, you don't have too many 15-year-olds like, oh, the VeggieTales movie, you know. Anyway, I rabbit trailed a bit there, but that really kind of gives you just a hint, just a taste.
I know. But honestly, after watching Morecambe and Wise, that led me to so many other British, actually mainly British double acts. So Morecambe and Wise, of course. Around the same time, I got into the Two Ronnies, which I know.
So that one's mine.
I know Charity will be talking about that a little bit. Of course, Cannon and Ball. I mean, those are. So I'm really big on double acts. I think there's just something about that dynamic.
Because it's a throwback to the classic vaudeville, you know, or even some of the other stuff we've watched. Like you mentioned Laurel and Hardy earlier.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
perfect,
you have The Straight Man and the Comic. You could even talk about TV shows, you know, like Andy Griffith. And you have Andy and Barney, you know, so it's just a classic
Andy
setup.
and Barney, you got Fred and Barney.
Yeah.
Rowan and Martin. I think double acts still work in other, even talking about VeggieTales, Bob and Larry. Bob the tomato and Larry the cucumber, for those who really want to know your vegetables. They're totally a double act.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because Bob is the reasonable one, so he's definitely the straight, and then you have Larry, who's just all over the place. I think
sort of like Gilligan's Island, which VeggieTales did do a spoof of Gilligan's Island. But yeah, it's very like Skipper Gilligan sometimes.
Yeah, so I think double acts have been around for, now maybe they weren't specifically like, you're the comic and you're the straight, but the way they write it, it has that dynamic. And I still think that works today. But yeah, it's fun to see people interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. I think, so for me, I feel like I had two different starts with British comedy. So maybe the first one was probably around the time I think that you had seen Monty Python, because then you knew about John Cleese. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when you introduced me to Fawlty Towers, right?
Yeah, well, I guess I need to backtrack. So I went full into British comedy in college, but in high school, I was actually introduced to Fawlty Towers way before Monty Python.
Oh, because it was on PBS.
Yeah.
Oh, so because we watched Keeping Up Appearances.
And Keeping Up Appearances.
Okay, so maybe for that it was before. Because there's Keeping Up Appearances As Time Goes By, which was on there.
Are You Being Served?
Yeah.
Very British.
Okay, so if we back up, I probably started watching British comedy at maybe like age 10?
Yeah, I guess the reason why, I guess it kind of counts for you. Maybe in college I was reintroduced and then I really got into it more.
I think when
but maybe as a teenager.
Well, when we watched it the first time, like when we did watch, which we were in the single digits watching Keeping Up Appearances, but if we were watching Keeping Up Appearances, I think we knew it was funny, but it wasn't like, ha ha, like we weren't rolling on the floor. And then, you know, later we learned about it. So maybe at age 10 for me, watching Keeping Up Appearances, Time Goes By, etc., etc. Later, which for me, that was probably maybe age 16, you introduced me to Fawlty Towers because...
Yeah, that was probably around the time. I know I was in high school when I first saw Fawlty Towers.
Well, because I remember when you introduced it to me, you were like, okay, you have to watch this show. The sarcasm is... you know, crazy, and, you know, watching Basil get angry, it's like, oh, this is something that you would do if you were actually to, like, let your anger out, you know? You know, customer service jobs, like, you really want to punch somebody in the face, but you know better not to, but you imagine it, you know? But if Basil were working retail, he'd probably, you know, slap you like he slaps Manuel, you know? Yeah. So I remember you telling me about Fawlty Towers, which, slight rabbit trail, I started watching that again this week, actually.
Oh, really?
Just, you know, I like taking a break from shows and, you know, rewatching them again because you forget some of the jokes that they do and they're funny all over again. So right now I'm rewatching Fawlty Towers, but I think my final start to British comedy happened when I was in college because around that time, well, a little pre-story before that. So big Sherlock fan, BBC Sherlock, Benedict Cumberbatch, Martin Freeman, and the rest, as I said, Gilligan.
I think that was another one I got you into too, because I found out about Sherlock before you did.
Yes, because the first one we watched was because at that time I didn't have a TV. You know, another rabbit trail. It's so funny because I watch TV shows now and I'm like, how come I never seen these shows or these movies? I look up the time they came out. I'm like, oh, okay, that came out when I was in college. And this was before, you know, all the streaming not before streaming services, but like
like at its peak.
Yeah, I'm like, I didn't have access to that stuff, and it's college internet access, which is super slow because every student's connected to it.
Yeah.
So like, I didn't get to watch TV. Maybe if I had a special treat, I would go to one of my friends who lived off campus and I could watch their TV, or in the rare moments that the lounge was free, which was very rare, then I could watch something in there. But for the most part, it was like, hey, let's have a movie night, and we go up to Walgreens to the Red Box, which sounds really old now.
Oh man,
but I think that was Red Box DVDs were like 99 cents, and so we could do a movie night for real cheap, and we order pizza. Like that was when I would get to watch TV or movies. So I watched Sherlock, and then I think when I was doing something for home, I was doing homework, and I obviously got distracted. I was looking at Benedict Cumberbatch because I was trying to find out something that he did. In my scrolling, I saw Cabin Pressure, and I was like, what the heck is Cabin Pressure?
Yeah.
And that one click changed my life forever, you know, because one, it was hilarious. Two, I love radio shows, which I guess this is where my throwback comes
Radio
in.
shows are amazing.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how much I liked them until later, because growing up, we listened to Adventures in Odyssey. You know, the Left Behind series was really big, you know, when I was growing up, and they had an adult series and a teen series. And so I did both of those, but they had a radio drama.
Yeah, that, and I started getting into Jack Benny, Bob Hope, Fair McGee and Molly.
Well, I mean, and I'm not even talking about old timey stuff. Like this stuff was what I listened to growing up that was current, but it was still radio shows. But we used to listen to that show driving on the way to school, that mystery Bible show.
Yeah, Who Done It?
Yeah,
on a 97.9 WGN.
Yeah, and okay, this memory here, but like I didn't realize. You know, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, those are radio shows. So when I saw, I was like, oh, a comedy radio show that wasn't for kids. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. The humor was just perfect. The writing was perfect. John Finnemore is just freaking brilliant. If you're listening to this, like, you are amazing. And like, another side note,
he's such a good writer. And
John
so
Finnemore's
funny.
Souvenir Program is also freaking hilarious. I didn't find that till much later. But anyway, back to Cabin Pressure. That was when I was like, hey, I like this. I want to do it. I want to write my own stuff. And so that's why I feel like that's my second start to British comedy, to where I was like, hey, I actually want to do something, which is when when I started the different ideas for the How May I Help You series, which someday in my lifetime will be recorded.
We'll do it.
It will be a big hit. It's
You heard it here, folks, and then you can refer to that after we become famous for doing that series.
It will be a really funny series, which is hopefully similar to, you know, Cabin Pressure, Faulty Towers, that type of thing. Because it's basically a typical setup of people put in these funny situations and things happen. Like, it's like 1 + 1 = 2, you know? And so that's
and it's corporate humor.
Yeah, and we've had enough experiences that most of my scripts that I've written so far are not very far from the truth. Like, I've thrown some humor and sarcasm in there, but some of these experiences have actually happened, which makes them funnier.
Yeah.
And I think whenever the time comes when we do record that, it'll be believable, because while I'm reading the lines, I'm going to be like, yeah, I remember when I said that. So I think I rabbit trailed a lot, but I feel like those were my different starts to British comedy.
Yeah, I guess we both have multiple starts, which I guess makes our introduction inconsistent. So, but
yeah, if you're taking notes, there's a pop quiz at the end of the podcast.
Apparently we're good at not talking chronologically. We start from the end and then the middle.
It's so funny because honestly, like, that's how all of our conversations go between the two of us, or just in our family, but we're all able to keep up with each other. Like, we can rabbit trail the heck out of everything, but we will always come back to where we were and remember all the different paths we took.
Yeah,
you know,
it all makes sense in the end.
So we kind of talked about the introductions of British comedy, and maybe even kind of dipped into, you know, how it applies to our life and what we want to do with it. But is there a British comedy that is just kind of like, this is my favorite, this is near and dear to my heart? Like, it's almost like a comfort food. Like, you know, you got to have that fried chicken, or you got to have the chocolate cake. Like, what's your chocolate cake for British comedy?
Ooh, chocolate cake with a cup of tea. I would have to still put Borkham and Wise at the top. That was kind of what really got me into it. I've never seen anything that's similar to my sense of humor. And out of all the comedies I've watched comedy my whole life. You know, Laurel and Hardy, Three Stooges, Dick Van Dyke, I Love Lucy. And I love watching all of that, but I never saw myself in it. I know that sounds really goofy, but like, I can't really see myself doing a poke in the eye like the Three Stooges or
like our parents would let us do that. Maybe that's why.
But or even like the Marx Brothers, like I wish I had that snappy wit, and I would like to, but I don't know. For some reason, looking at Morecambe and Wise, I was watching one of their routines one day, and they were saying something, and in my mind, I'm like, how I would respond, and whatever the punchline or the one-liner was. And they said the joke. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I would say. Yeah. So that, because it's close to my sense of humor, and I just think they're just a perfect duo. But it's definitely teetered more when I discovered Cannon and Ball. So
and when was that?
Well, thank you, Charity, for that question.
Not that I'm trying to lead you into a particular direction, but yes, Sarah, tell me about Cannon and Ball.
Technically, I was introduced to Cannon and Ball back in 2011. There was a documentary about BBC Light Entertainment, which is what they call like the comedy department. The documentary was some of the biggest stars and acts of the light entertainment over, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 years of television or something like that. And one of them was Cannon and Ball. And I had never heard of them at the time, but I don't know, I kind of liked how they look, and their comedy was very similar to Morecambe and Wise, which I realize in retrospect because they had some of the same writers. During the early times of Morecambe and Wise's career, they had some writers, and I noticed they also wrote for Cannon and Ball. And then later on, I noticed, they're doing the same routines. They just added their own flair to it. In 2020, their theme song, Together We'll Be Okay, was all over my Twitter feed because I also follow British people. Go figure. But that kind of reintroduced me to them, and then during lockdown I started watching all of their shows, so I just binged all of their shows, kind of like what I did with Morecambe and Wise.
Which is what everybody did during lockdown.
Did. I became an instant
2020
fan.
was the year of the binge.
Yeah, that should be the title for it, the year of the binge. And what's really cool is that, you see, this is the power of social media. You know, you always hear the negative aspects of it, and yes, there are, but there's some great positives to social media. And one is you're able to interact with celebrities. So the cool thing was that around the time I had gotten into Cannon and Ball, I saw them on Twitter. Both of them had been on Twitter for a while. And so I started following Tommy and kind of interacting with him, and if he would send a tweet and I would comment it or like it, and he would like it, and that just made my absolute day. A wonderful thing happened. He followed me back, and man, I don't know what cloud I was on. I know cloud 9, but it had to have been higher than that. But that was just the awesomest thing, and I think it's really cool that I've been able to interact with Tommy. I was able to interact a little bit with Bobby before he passed away, but I'm able to from time to time interact with Tommy, which is pretty cool, And I know there's a lot
Tommy, if for whatever reason you happen to be listening, Sarah is fangirling over here big time. Man.
I would love to meet Tommy one of these days. But the fact that I'm able to follow him on social media, that's one step closer to what I was a few years ago.
Well, since we're talking about British comedy, if Tommy is listening, you're always invited. We have an open invitation to our podcast anytime you wanna join. So, little commercial there.
Yeah, I'll do my best to breathe and speak while seeing you on the screen.
Well, while you take a moment to breathe, I guess I'll jump in here. I'm looking at the time, and normally when we talk about TV shows and movies, we always have to sneak in a second episode because we can't just fit it in one. It's pretty much impossible.
To be honest with us, we can fit it in like 6, but we have to at least do 2.
That's true. We don't want to hold you captive too long. So we're just going to hold you captive for 2 episodes. So join us for our second episode of The Sisters Talking about British comedy. I'm going to throw it to Sarah so you can get more information on how you can find us online.
Thank you, Charity. Well, you've heard...
Should we do this in a British accent? No, never mind.
No, I haven't gotten that confident yet.
Okay, no. Sorry, England. We won't torture you this way. Okay, in an American accent, Sarah, please tell our audience how they can find us online.
Well, you can binge listen to all of our episodes. Just go to doublestuffpod.com, of course. We're available on all the different podcast platforms, so you can check us out there. Of course, we're available on Facebook and Instagram, of course, YouTube at Double Stuff Podcast, and of course on Twitter, or whatever it's called now, on Double Stuff P, and that's the letter P.
It's Tuesday, isn't it?